Welcome to the online employee wellness webinar on improving your immune health, your immune resilience. This is one of the options available to our BHS employees for um, satisfying the wellness needs for our participation. And it's my hope that this will be much more than just kind of an obligation that you have to go through to get credit for wellness, and that this will be some actual news that you can use at a time that has been most interesting in terms of the pandemic, in terms of the disruption of our lives personally, professionally. I mean, who hasn't been impacted by this? And it's been sustained. So we've been for many months now, even though the activity here in the Berkshires has been much quieter than in many of the parts of the U.S., we anticipate what will be ongoing challenges, certainly into the fall, winter. And so what I wanted to share with you was an overview from a wellness perspective. This is an integrative health perspective that looks at many ways in which the choices we make, from the foods that we eat, to the quality of our sleep, to the quality of light in our environment, timing of our meals, whether we're getting sufficient nutrients that support our immune function. All of these things are very much connected, not just to good health and the ability to thrive, but one can actually take their immune system into a much more efficient and resilient state. And surely we all want that as we attempt to dodge the many bullets that are out there right now, or that we may confront again in the months ahead. So I'm just going to put my share screen on here and share a few slides with you. This slide deck should be available to you as well for download. And again, this is Building Immune Resilience. And my name is Mark Pettus. I know many in the system are familiar with the work that I and our amazing wellness team do. And my official role with the health system is Director of Wellness, Population Health, and Community Care. And I also serve on the faculty for the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And so, again, it's a joy to share some of this content with you. And let's dive in. So, again, I think it's pretty fair to say that we have all been navigating the perfect storm here for the last several months. And as the tides come and go, it can be pretty unsettling when you're out on open waters. And these are uncharted waters, right? These are not waters that any of us are familiar with. We don't have a GPS, although we do have more of an understanding as time goes by that can help us navigate more effectively. But this is an incredibly challenging time to one's emotional wellness, to one's physical, mental awareness, and certainly those you love, your family members, maybe your kids, maybe you're a caregiver for a loved one, which is challenging on a typical day. But with all that's going on here, it takes that to an even much higher level of complexity. So I'm going to just share a few things that can hopefully calm the waters and give you a bit more of a GPS as you navigate these unfamiliar waters. And I would also add that while what I'll be sharing with you is very powerful in enhancing one's immune resilience, these are just health promoting practices in general. And many people notice that their weight and metabolism improves, notice that their mood improves, notices that perhaps they have a bit less pain and more energy. And so the attributes of our lives and how we interpret and respond to the conditions of our lives can very much either enhance or disrupt our immune function, and in much the same way, many other aspects of our day-to-day experience of life could either be enhanced or undermined as well. And this really is a great opportunity. I think it was Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago, right, who once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And so, as overwhelming as these past several months have been for many, most of the challenges in our lives do bring opportunity, and it's not always easy to see that opportunity or to execute on that opportunity. But our beliefs, how we perceive what's happening to us, is a major, major predictor of what actually will happen. So one way to perceive the pandemic, for example, is that you are a human being who just happens to be alive at a challenging time here in 2020. This thing called COVID-19 has come out of nowhere and is now wreaking havoc throughout the planet, in our communities, and maybe in your home and in your life. And one might see themselves as a bit of an innocent victim. We had no ability to influence the emergence of this virus. And so one mindset might be that I'm an innocent bystander. There's this horrible threat that is out in the environment, and I just hope and pray that I will not become a victim, or that somebody that I know and love will not become a victim of this. And while that's understandable, and while I think we've all gone there, another way to think about this is that while COVID, in fact, is a threat that none of us have any direct influence over, we do have amazing and powerful influence over the capacity to create tremendous health, resilience, and the ability to thrive. This is within our own sphere of influence. If you were an automobile, this is very much under the purview of what's under the hood. And we have a lot that we can do to enhance that aspect of who we are. So in this belief system, you are less a victim and more an empowered warrior who can actually choose and adapt life in a way that will give you much greater resilience and much improvement in your quality of life. That is a very different proposition than I just hope nothing happens to me and I'm going to just look to dodge the bullets and we'll see what happens. Now, I am suggesting that while that may be important and we all need a little bit of luck in our lives, this is about empowerment. Wellness is about empowerment. It is about returning the power to the person. And our team and our philosophy is to help give people knowledge and skill that can help them realize this potential. This is not a good time to be sleepwalking through life. There is a lot that we can do. And so that's just sort of the principle of wellness and certainly holistic health. And I'm going to start talking a little bit about what we know about nutrition research and immune resilience. And there's a lot of interesting work that's been out there. We certainly have learned a lot more about what puts an individual at greatest risk of acquiring COVID, and if one acquires COVID. And this is also true for influenza. It would be true for other infections as well. The extent to which one is impacted by this, how sick they get, whether or not they may require hospitalization, whether on the worst case scenario one might require critical care or even have their mortality at risk, will be determined at many levels by your current state of health. And so we're going to look at what we're learning in terms of this research, because we know that many people who acquire COVID may get no symptoms at all, may not even know they ever had it. Some may get mild flu-like symptoms and be inconvenienced by it. Yes, feel sick, not be able to work for a period of time, but will rally back completely with no consequences. And then there are those who may find their lives just overwhelmed and um, very much placed at risk. So what I am suggesting is that a lot can be done through nutrition to lower your risks that will have a huge impact on your ability to weather the storm and the storms to come. And so one very important area of research involves what we call macronutrients. There are three categories of macronutrients. There are carbohydrates, there are fats, and there are protein. And in each of these categories, there are many, many different types of foods. We tend to oversimplify often when we're teaching about nutrition. An example of that is fat. And people often think that fat is either bad for them or maybe not. And we tend to think of all fats as being the same. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that there's a whole array of different quality fats. And so, one can't compare fat from a pasture-raised beef or egg with the same fat that one might find in a commercially produced egg from a chicken that doesn't see the light of day, that is fed predominantly grain, that doesn't get to roam around pasture, or from that burger that comes from beef that is in one of these feedlot operations. That, while they both contain fat, one cannot compare the benefit or risk of that fat without looking at the sourcing and the quality of that. Well, the same is true for carbohydrates. And while fat has gotten a lot of attention, I'm going to make the case in this webinar that fat is probably not nearly as bad for us as we have been told. Also misleading, unintentionally, is that carbohydrates are probably much more concerning than we have been told. In particular, those carbohydrate-dense foods, and most carbohydrate-dense foods that are listed here simply implies that most of that food is just carb, and that carb tends to be a very simple starch, sugary carb that is broken down quickly after one consumes it and quickly turns into glucose or sugar in the blood and insulin that goes with that. We call these high glycemic, or some refer to these as fast carbs. Fast carbs, if you were to look at one nutritional opportunity in your life, it would be, where am I consuming too many of these fast, high glycemic carbs, and what can I do to begin to decrease them and introduce healthier carbohydrate sources, healthier fat sources, and that alone will have a tremendous impact on your quality of life and certainly your immune resilience. So sugar, grain-based foods that we love, foods that comprise as much as 50 to 55% of the average intake in the standard American diet, come from these processed grains, breads, boxed cereals, pasta, pastries, desserts, chips, pretzels, granola bars. These are fantastically delicious, and they have a powerful addictive effect. And I've never met a carbohydrate that I didn't love. But what we're talking about here is a very important attribute with respect to the glycemic effect. And these flour-based foods, these grain-based foods, and wheat is a classic example. Wheat in any form, from whole grain to any form of wheat, is a very high glycemic food. And while some people can tolerate these foods before they run into problems, for most American adults, these are foods you want to be very careful with. Some fruits, and while all fruits are better than, say, a bagel or a bag of chips, some fruits do have a higher fructose or higher glycemic impact. And so things like bananas, grapes, pears, while again, they're always better than a bagel, often I steer people toward the lower glycemic fruits like berries in particular, any berry. is awesome. Grapefruit are really good sources of nutrients with a lower glycemic effect. Dried fruits, raisins, apricots, um, cranberries. Dried fruits are like candy. There's very little nutritional value. These are very concentrated sugar bombs, and generally, I recommend being very cautious with them. Same is true for sugar sweetened soft drinks. I really hate to say this, but if you're a beer lover, beer is the equivalent of liquid bread. Very high glycemic. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to lower your sugar, your blood pressure, beer is just not a great choice. Uh, Drinks like wine, some hard liquor spirits tend to be a bit more forgiving in terms of their glycemic effect. Certainly, many of these foods can be introduced at low levels, but for the most part, one wants to avoid those processed grain, flour, high glycemic foods. When you do so, your insulin levels will lower, your inflammation lowers, which means your immune system will be functioning in a more balanced way. You'll start to burn more fat. And we know that the majority of people who became very sick from COVID and whose lives were either taken or jeopardized from COVID tended to have cardiometabolic risk factors. They were overweight. They had a higher sugar level. They were either pre-diabetic or diabetic. They tended to have high blood pressure. So the same risk factors for heart disease, for example, or stroke, are the same risk factors one begins to see in the acquisition and risk of COVID. The same is true for influenza. So this is a powerful strategy to modify, reduce, even reverse cardiometabolic risk. And in doing so, you will totally render yourself more bulletproof from many of the environmental threats that we confront in day-to-day life. Now, there are many supplements in addition to other nutritional principles that are very important for immune function. On the left-hand side of this slide, these are just general nutritional principles. I don't like to think about dieting per se. It's really more about quality food. Quality of calories is much more important, I think, than quantity of calories. And so the less processed the food is, the better it will be for you. Diverse food intake, so a more diverse array, for example, of plant-based foods, of fish, pasture-raised eggs, red meats, avocados, nuts, different and healthier fats like olive oil, whole fat dairy. Highland Farm is a good example of a local dairy farm where these Jersey cows are pasture raised. It's just a superb quality dairy product. Same can be said again from the fat that you find in a pasture raised egg or fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, trout, anchovies, sardines. These are high quality fats, olive oil, coconut oil, that are nutrient dense foods. They provide a lot of nutrition, but you will not get that sugar insulin response. And so the nutrient density of the food, and most foods that aren't processed will have far more nutrients in them than foods that are processed. Again, the low glycemic effect. So again, these are foods that one wants to be very careful with grains, both whole and processed grains, and the many foods and processed foods that come from those carbohydrate-dense sources. Plant-based foods are really the holy grail. Lots of, as we'll see, lots of nutrients, very dense and key essential vitamins like vitamin C. We know that that's very important for our immune system. The fat-soluble vitamins from these healthy fat sources like vitamin A and vitamin E and vitamin K. These are very important at helping our health in general and our immune resilience. Meal timing, and I have another slide on this, but there's a very fascinating body of research suggesting that regardless of what a person is eating, though what I'm suggesting that what you eat is obviously important, that if one can compress their meal time into about a 10-hour window a day, and particularly if that window is brought into the cycle between sun rising and sun setting, of course, that cycle is going to vary depending on the time of year. That seems to be associated with dramatic improvements in metabolic health, immune balance, lowering of insulin and sugar levels, or what we call increased insulin sensitivity. So meal timing is really important, and many people will tend to eat throughout the day. And especially important is if you're eating within a few hours of bedtime, overnight, your body is going to be investing its energy on metabolizing and digesting. And your body and my body did not evolve to be doing that in the overnight hours. Typically, this is a time to repair, to process what you learned throughout the day. This is the rejuvenation period. And if we're spending most of that rejuvenation with poor quality sleep and digesting foods that we should have consumed earlier in the day, we will undermine our health potential. Now, supplements there's a role for them. Certainly getting anything from whole foods is always the holy grail. But some of the things that our grandmothers taught us have never been more true than they are today. And cod liver oil, for example, and there are good sources out there that are a little more palatable, is a really great source of fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. And that can be a really good thing to consider, particularly over the fall-winter flu season. Zinc is a very effective antimicrobial. Zinc can reduce the replication of viruses. They can inhibit a virus's tendency to attach to the lining of our throat and our respiratory tree. So zinc, 15 to 30 milligrams a day can be a really nice supplement. I don't take it year-round, but I definitely will take it when flu or COVID activity is high in our community. Vitamin C, and again, while produce and colorful vegetables are the perfect source of vitamin C, often taking a supplement 1 to 2 grams a day or 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day can be a very helpful additional safety net, if you will, in terms of enhancing your immune function. Probiotics are essentially bacterial flora that ordinarily would exist in your gut that you're taking as a supplement. We have an array of really good probiotic options in our community pharmacy down in the main hospital floor, the Jones-Warrener floor. And our pharmacists there are also glad to discuss anything with you with respect to these supplements. So I highly recommend you check them out. They offer discounts as well to our employees. And vitamin D, a lot of research with COVID has shown that people with lower vitamin Ds do seem to be at much greater risk of not only acquiring COVID, but becoming more sick from it. And the greatest source of vitamin D is sunlight, particularly this time of year. 15 to 20 minutes of unprotected sun exposure to your arms, legs, in the earlier morning hours and later afternoon hours this time of year will be a very effective way to support your vitamin D needs. As the sun season essentially diminishes over the long fall-winter season that we have, taking a vitamin D supplement, I think, is a good thing to do. And generally, I recommend having blood levels checked. Your primary care provider can check this. It's very inexpensive. Insurance should cover it. And generally, I'm telling folks that you want to get your vitamin D levels up to 30 or higher. It's people whose vitamin D levels are less than 20 that tend to be at much higher risk for many chronic health issues. But we've learned a lot about the risk that acquiring and becoming very sick from COVID does seem to be highly associated with lower vitamin D levels. Now, plant-based foods are just very, very important. I know you are aware of that. But the few things that I would just emphasize on this slide is that the nutrients, particularly things like vitamin C and many other anti-inflammatory nutrients, are highly concentrated in plant-based foods. Plant-based foods also have a lot of fiber. And what we are learning in the current state, fiber is the most important contributor to a healthy microbiome. So the extent to which the biome in your gut and the diversity of that ecosystem is directly linked to the diversity of plant-based foods and fiber that you're consuming is critically important to good health. Most of us get far less fiber that we need. And while most of us think about fiber from the perspective of regularity, and yes, it will help with regularity of bowel movements, but the essence of fiber is really to create a fermentable substrate, a fermentable food for the organisms in our gut. And that is an amazingly positive health proposition. And again, sometimes I tell folks, a couple cups of greens a day is ideal. If you don't like a lot of variety, the cruciferous vegetables, the broccoli, cauliflower, collards, cabbage, kale, spinach, asparagus, arugula, romaine lettuce. These are powerhouse. They also can help in women with estrogen balance and metabolism. They help with our detoxification. So it helps us and our liver get rid of toxins that are in our environment that we need to get rid of each day. They're just really special in their ability to enhance our metabolic pathways, from immune resilience to detoxification to hormone metabolism. These are really great foods. The allium family, onions, leeks, garlics, really great sources of nutrients and fiber. We know that many beans, lentils, these are inexpensive foods. They're economical. They're really good sources of protein. Some people can have digestive sensitivity to large quantities. And so sometimes soaking them beforehand make them more tolerable from a digestive standpoint. Cooking with pressure cooking can reduce what we call lectins. Beans, legumes have a higher concentration of lectins. And if they're not processed well, that can just disrupt digestion for people who might be more sensitive. We talked about lower glycemic fruits and berries. And fermentable foods, of course, are what have been our ancestral traditions for many, many years as a way of introducing probiotics. And so whether that is sauerkraut, yogurt, kimchi, kombucha, these are all really good sources of nutrition, fiber, and biome support. And we know that this relationship is critical. The diversity of the organisms, this biome in your mouth and in your gut and on your skin, which is where they reside predominantly, are one of the major predictors of your overall health and quality of life. Who would have thought? And then if you look at some of these poor quality carbohydrates, these carbohydrate dense foods, right? These are the foods that we love that taste great. They're also foods that will leave you feeling hungry within a few hours of consuming them, which is why you never really feel satiated on these foods. They jack your insulin levels, your glucose, and they will wreak havoc with your ability to respond from an immune threat. And we know that our biome, the organisms in your mouth and in your gut, will ferment these poorer quality foods in ways that promote inflammation will disrupt your neurotransmitters. So your attention, your energy, your ability to concentrate, your mood, your anxiety levels will be disrupted and often made worse by these foods. Again, your higher insulin levels, prediabetes, diabetes, one of the great risk factors for COVID and influenza morbidity and mortality, are made worse when you look at these relationships, weight, metabolism, your mitochondria, which is where you get your energy from, and your stress response, what we call the fight flight response. These foods will aggravate those metabolic systems. And when consumed regularly, multiple times a day, often this is one of the single greatest contributors to diminished quality of life. And so it's not just the food, but it's how the biome that accompanies you, that is part of who you are. You're a composite organism. It's the relationship between the food and the organism that produces these fermentation byproducts that then disrupt many of your metabolic pathways. This is all understanding that continues to rapidly evolve just in recent years. Now, if you look at higher quality carbohydrates, those coming from plant-based foods, for example, lower glycemic, nutrient dense, more fermentable fiber, we know that when the organisms in our mouth and in our gut ferment those foods, you see just the opposite. You see more diversity of the organisms in your mouth, which means fewer cavities, less endodontal disease and periodontal disease, which we know to be a major driver of chronic complex health over one's lifetime. In your gut, you'll see greater diversity of organisms with lower inflammation, lower sugars and insulin levels, decreased cancer risk, losing weight, improving metabolism. These are the exact opposite metabolic enhancements made possible when you change the source of the fiber that the biome that is a part of you ultimately ferments. These are critical relationships to keep in mind. And we know that there are many food sources. And again, most wise traditions just saw food as medicine. So they would know that if somebody had a fever, was maybe bedridden because they had little energy, that there were certain spices and certain things that they could serve those individuals that would help their own systems manage those problems. All of the approaches that we're talking about, unlike medications that may have an important role, all that we're talking about here takes your systems and helps them operate on a much higher level. That is what wellness is all about. High impact wellness is about taking your design and making it run to the full extent that it can. If you think of your body as a Porsche and you've got poor quality oil, you're not tuning it up, you're never running it more than 30 miles an hour, you will never realize the full potential of that sophisticated engineering design. Well, the human body is the most sophisticated engineering design on the planet, and it comes well equipped with many systems to help you live longer and to live better and to live well. But turning those systems on requires much greater attention to the choices that you make, how you eat, how you move, how you interpret and respond to stress in your life, how you sleep, the conditions that allow you to sleep, right? How socially connected you are, how much meaning and purpose you're cultivating in your work, love, and play. All of these attributes are ultimately what take the designs that are in you. We call this epigenetics, and they then turn those systems on. That's what this roadmap is about. And we know that many of these spices, for example, black pepper, turmeric, rosemary, ginger, are examples of spices that have powerful anti-inflammatory and detoxification capacity. One thing that is often overlooked when you talk about nutrition is the nutritional value beyond just the vitamin or the mineral. There are a couple dozen vitamins and minerals in foods that many of us are aware of, and they're critically important for human health. And often we have to get these from foods because we cannot make these on our own. We call them essential. And we know that many Americans are undernourished. They may be overfed and overweight, but they're undernourished. They have lower levels of omega-3s, lower levels of magnesium, lower levels of zinc, lower levels of B vitamins. These phytonutrients go beyond that. These are things that give produce color, polyphenols, acanthocyanids. These are all sort of great Scrabble words, the flavonols, carotenoids, the catechins, glucosinolates. If you're a real geek like me, you kind of get into this. But the point is that these are families of chemicals that plants produce to render themselves more resilient. If you're a flower and you live here in the Berkshires, you can't just uproot and head south for the winter. You have to find a way to produce a defense system that will allow you to survive very harsh conditions, that will allow you to survive pests like mold or fungus or insects. They do that by producing these phytonutrients. And there's a growing body of research suggesting that when other species like humans consume the phytonutrients that allow the plant to be more resilient, that the human consuming that food can have more resilience conferred upon themselves. That is a radical idea of how a plant species can support a human species by producing a chemical that the human ultimately consumes. That's the beauty of nature. And ultimately, in any holistic integrated model, you quickly become to realize that that which is good for our ecosystem is good for the human. That which is bad for the ecosystem is bad for the human. That which is good for the human is good for the ecosystem. That which is bad for the human is not good for the ecosystem. We are an integrated life form. I'm just going to touch briefly, and I've already mentioned this, on time-restricted eating. It's not about restricting how much you're eating, though many people might do that as a consequence of this intervention. It's just restricting the window within which you eat. Most of the research suggests that when you get to a 10-hour or less window, 10 is sort of the magic number, you dramatically turn on all of your resiliency systems. Much in the same way that exercise, one of the many ways that exercise works is it turns on all of your defense systems, your resiliency systems. It restores, it unleashes that software programming that many of us have built in, and we've downloaded it, but it's never activated. We never have the activation code. Healthy living is the activation code to these software programs, and time-restricted eating appears to be a really powerful one. In part because our ancient ancestors just naturally consumed over a shorter window during the day. They didn't have food available to them 24/7 as we do. And the more ancestral we can become in some of our practices, being outdoors more, playing more, not eating over the course of the entire day, focusing on more whole, unprocessed foods, getting more sunlight, having more love and meaning in one's life, family, connection, community, these all become deeply rooted biologic, socio-cultural expressions that in modern life we have to be a bit more mindful to activate and create. Ours is an environment not well suited for those ancestral practices. And I'm sure you've all seen evidence for that as you've looked at your lives in recent months. We know that this is a very effective strategy for weight loss, particularly weight around the midsection, which is where inflammation and prediabetes, diabetes often emerges. Ruth Patterson at University of California has shown dramatic reductions in breast cancer recurrence. These are women that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, those that time restrict after their diagnosis, all other things being equal compared to women who do not time restrict, have about a 40% reductions in recurrence. If we had a medicine that did that, it would be front page news. This is a lifestyle intervention that has a powerful impact in this particular example. Um, you can anticipate reductions in cardiac risk, lower inflammation, and all of the symptoms that come from that, like pain, diminished energy, um, maybe symptoms like asthma, which is an inflammatory problem of the lungs, eczema, an inflammatory problem of the skin, depression, inflammation in the brain. So people are often amazed at the many things that begin to improve with these interventions, because ultimately you're addressing root causes through these interventions. And again, you're activating the software that can allow your resiliency to more fully manifest. And lastly, this is an interesting research area called autophagy. You may or may not be aware that most of the cells in your body have a very short life expectancy. Red blood cells, for example, live about 4 months. We're turning these over every few months. These aren't the same red blood cells that you had a year ago. The same is true for your skin cells, for the lining of your intestinal tract. Many of your white blood cells and immune cells, they're in and out. They emerge, they're born, they do their thing, then they die off. Well, it's really important that when cells recycle, that they be cleaned up quickly. You don't want too much of those dead cells, those aging cells, to accumulate. It would be the equivalent of putting your trash out every week and then going 6 months without anyone coming to clean that up. And so we need this internal recycling capacity. That's what autophagy is. The more effectively we recycle, that seems to be an important mediator of aging or senescence. This is a hot area of research right now. Time-restricted eating is one way to enhance your autophagy, your recycling. Now, I think everyone is aware of the importance of sleep, the rhythms of life, but we know that disrupted sleep will certainly undermine your immune response, your immune resilience, and it will disrupt many other things that will put a person at risk for COVID or influenza or other chronic complex diseases. And so these are time-tested sleep hygiene recommendations from trying to maintain a regular schedule. That's really important. Some people have a very different sleep-wake schedule, Monday through Friday, than they might have on a weekend. I call that social sort of weekend social jet lag. So finding more consistency there is important. Limiting daytime napping that can be disruptive to sleeping at night. A power nap for 15, 20 minutes is fine. But sleeping for maybe an hour and a half, couple of hours could be disruptive to your sleep-wake cycle. Complete darkness at night is very, very important. Even low levels of light that are getting access to your eyes often contain what we call blue light. This might be outdoor lighting coming in through your window. It may be lighting from a phone or something that you're charging in your bedroom. Low levels of light will trick your brain into thinking that it's earlier in the day. So you may be ready to retire at 10 p.m., but the light that is accessing your retina in the bedroom you are in will convince your brain that it's 6 p.m., and that will entirely shift your hormone, sleep-wake, circadian rhythm cycle. So darkness is important. Cooler temperatures are important. It is once you start getting down to about 66 degrees, that will stimulate a sleep response because, the nighttime for our ancient ancestors was cooler. It was those cooler ambient temperatures that was a signal to the brain and the body that sleep was upon us. And so trying to keep the room a little bit cooler at night to the extent possible will help with that. Trying to limit the amount of work and more intense sort of thinking that you're doing in the bedroom can be very, very important. Setting the context where when you're going to bed, you're either going to go play a little bit or you're getting ready for sleep. And the intentions you bring to that are very important. Our intentions are very important. If We take the troubles of the day or the work of the day into that sacred space. uh, in all likelihood, we will disrupt the consequences of a good night's sleep not coming through for us. And we know that many stress reduction practices, from deep breathing to guided imagery to nature sounds, can be very, very soothing. A gratitude journal. What was the highlight of my day today? What was the one true joyful experience that I had today? Uh, those are the things that we want to take to the context of falling asleep, letting the rest, rejuvenation, restorative systems turn themselves on in a more positive, high energy way will hugely serve us from an immune resilience perspective. We talked a little bit about sunlight and letting the photons flow, and we are in the midst of peak sun season right now. It's July as I record this, and the peak sun season will probably continue through, mid-September. It's way too short a season, as we know, but certainly getting more of that natural sunlight during the day, late afternoon, early evening is very, very important. And some of it is vitamin D related, but our circadian clocks, and humans are all on a timer, have historically relied on sun rising and sun setting as the primary environmental cues to waking up and turning the systems on, and on the other end of the day, turning it down and getting ready for rest and restoration. And it's the light quality that is the information within which those cues communicate with your system, your biology, your energy. So in addition to the sleep hygiene basics, I highly recommend getting small amounts. You don't want to sunburn. I'm talking small amounts of unprotected sun exposure, 15, 30 minutes twice a day in the earlier morning hours. You get more blue light. That turns your system on. In the later afternoon, evening, you get less blue light and more red, orange light. That turns your system down, gets you ready for the night. Is a powerful reset of your circadian clocks, and maintaining as much of that ancestral light quality and exposure is very, very important. Now, the best blue light is from early morning sunshine, and I don't have sunglasses on for, at least 15 minutes in the morning. If I'm driving to work, I'll have the window down a little bit so all of those wavelengths of light can get through me. Even an inch will allow that. And I do an inventory, and I recommend you do an inventory of the light quality in your office and where you spend most of your time at home in the evening, family room or bedroom. And I would suggest thinking about trading out any of the little curly compact fluorescent lighting. Tends to have a bit more blue light. And so in your office, in your maybe family room, bedroom, at home at night, warmer lighting. And this is usually like a warm halogen, which is an incandescent. It's just more energy efficient, or a warm LED. And usually what you'll see on the packaging of that light bulb, it may say warm LED. It may have what is called the color temperature if you do the fine print. And what you see here, 2,500 to 3,000 Kelvin, which is the K, is a warmer color temperature. Warmer implies more of the yellow, orange, red lighting. Getting too much blue light after sunset, whether that's coming from a phone or a tablet or a computer, can be very disruptive. And so there are blue blocker filters that all of these technologies now have in place. Silicon Valley understands the risks here, which is why they've gotten out in front of this by putting in many filters that you can turn on in your smart devices in an effort to filter out that blue light. This, I think, is a big story, and one that we're learning more about. And again, blue blocker glasses, these just are really amber lensed glasses. You could get a pair for $10 on Amazon. Sometimes I'll wear these if I'm, let's say, watching a baseball game or a Patriot game. It's, later at night, and I'm getting a lot of that blue light from the television. If I put the blue blocker glasses on, you're still getting a great visual experience, but you'll feel like you're sort of out more earlier in the day. You're filtering out that blue light. It'll be less disruptive to your circadian rhythms. There are many other wellness strategies, but one that I love and one that is so uniquely tailored to the environment that we're in here in the Berkshires is this concept of forest bathing, just getting out in nature. And I think many people who, while there clearly is benefit from social distancing, there's also a downside if we're not getting out, we're not really taking advantage of all of the therapeutic influences that nature has. Surely we want to be wise if we're in a crowd, but Shinrin Yoku, this Japanese concept of forest bathing, is very powerful and is associated with global health and quality of life improvements, from mental health to physical health, mind, mood. It lowers inflammation. And so take advantage of getting outdoors, even if you're just sitting out in your yard, walking on one of our local trails or in your neighborhood. And if you can have somebody with you that you love, and that may be a person, it may be a pet, share that experience, have some fun with it. These are powerfully health promoting, and they do wonders to improve your immune resilience. Much in the same way that movement can. Movement really is the holy grail in so many ways. So we often say motion is the lotion. And I just tell people, walk as much as you can. And surely there are people who may have functional limitation, and that may require things like a stationary bike or a recumbent bike, things that you can modify that allow you to move with less joint strain. Swimming and water aerobics can be very gentle and forgiving on the joints. So movement is good, and the more we make it fun, the better. One of my favorites, and the feedback I always get from folks, really is around dancing. Dancing is an amazingly therapeutic. We are wired to move to music, and of course, all ancient traditions had dancing rituals, drumming rituals, community celebrations that everyone shared in. So when you're moving, and you're moving to the sound of music that you have chosen because you love it, because it makes you feeling happy. Maybe it brings back memories of a particular time in your life, a person or a relationship. When you select those tunes and you just let yourself go, maybe you're just going to be home alone. Nobody's watching, no reason to be self-conscious. Just let it flow. Let the movement flow through the music and the sound and the vibration that you are immersed in. These are powerfully therapeutic implications. And there's a lot of, we would call this quantum physics, audio waves. The same is true for sunlight, which is a visible ray. These are energy, frequency, vibration, as the great Nikola Tesla referred to them. So dance to the music you love. And just do it as much as you can. This is powerfully health promoting. You'll get a lot of exercise without having the perception that you have had to kill yourself to get this effect. This is fun. Make it fun. Now, this may seem a bit trite, but laughter really is good medicine. And there's good research to suggest that if you introduce, and maybe it's a show that you like, and we all have things that we know predictably will tickle our funny bone. This has an amazing response on reducing your cortisol, your stress response, improving your immune response. If you give people a vaccine and 50 of them, you give the vaccine, the other 50 you give the vaccine, and then you have them watch a couple of hours of some funny content, And then 24 hours later, you begin to measure the antibodies they're producing in response to that vaccine, which is how vaccines work. You will tend to see a more robust immune response in those people who have had some recent laughter, some recent humor. And so I tell our wellness team and our infection control folks, when you're giving folks, influenza, and we're probably soon going to be adding COVID to our vaccination routines, think of something funny. And chances are you will have a better response. Hey, go figure. That is low-hanging fruit, and there's no cost for that. There's a lot that we do in wellness, and there's a lot that is available to you around mindfulness practices, whether it's the pause, as we refer to it, that as Dr. Sabo, my dear colleague, would refer to as the yoga breath, that soft belly, inhaling, softening your belly, filling your lungs from the bottom up, holding it for that brief moment, and then exhaling slowly. That three-part breath, soft belly, expanding and filling your lungs from the bottom up, and then exhaling slowly. These are dramatic practices, but you can reproduce this through yoga, through a walk in the woods, through anything that brings you passion and joy. Maybe it's a good book. Maybe it's just looking at artwork. It's the passion that will elevate those energetic levels in ways that will totally calibrate your immune response and your metabolic landscape. And I think you all are well aware of how easy it is to get sucked into the just unrelenting negativity in the media from the news that we read, the news that we hear on the radio, the news that we see on the television, the news that we get in our memos and our emails. And it just gets overwhelming. And it helps to just be aware of that and to create time to unplug, because this can be a very insidious, subtle way of bringing you into a stress state that you may not even realize that you're in. And so I leave you with this thought, this interesting area of research in consciousness. Consciousness is your awareness that you exist. You're aware that you're here and you're different than maybe someone else. And I would say that those perceived differences are not as real as they appear. We all come from the same creative source and energy. I don't want to get too sort of philosophical, but how you perceive your reality will begin to create the reality that you perceive. And in this context, your mind, your beliefs, your thoughts and emotions that come from those beliefs are like the film. You become the writer, director, and producer of your film of life. And it is your belief systems and the thoughts and emotions that come as a consequence of your belief systems that form the basis of the film that you create. Your brain then projects that film. Your brain is the projector. And your life is the screen upon which that film plays out. You call it life. So what I am suggesting to you is that you can become the writer, director, producer of your film of life by beginning to examine the belief systems that guide how you interpret the world that you're in. If you believe that you are a hopeless, powerless, innocent victim that hopefully will not succumb to COVID, you will have a very different experience of COVID than someone whose belief systems are that they are powerful, they can create opportunities that allow themselves to lower their risk, they can become more resilient. Those are very different belief systems, and your biology is very much a consequence of your beliefs. So I leave you with this consideration that much of what impacts your health and your biography, your story of life, will be traced to your beliefs, and we all have unique challenges here. These perceptions, if they're not serving you well, will lead to emotions and thoughts that will tip the balance of your stress response toward fight flight. instead of the antidote, this calm, parasympathetic. We lose our connection to the whole. Our lives begin to feel more fragmented and disrupted. And we all know the experience of that. Changing your health and your quality of life, becoming more resilient, requires changing your beliefs and perceptions in a way that can create more positive context and passion in your life. And this requires finding that which you're passionate about, that which creates meaning in your life, and do the best you can to create that. Run with it as far as you can to the best of your ability. Try not to attach any expectations or insistence on the outcome. That's very hard for us to do. Let the synchronicities of life reveal to you that which you need in order to learn and to develop and to grow. Trust that. And no matter what emerges, and we all need help with this. This is not a journey that was meant to be flied solo. This is a journey meant to be shared. And I feel very blessed to have many friends, colleagues, an amazing wellness team that do so much to support my life, that bring joy into my life, that help me with direction, with understanding, with advice and feedback. So go with the flow of life. Create those synchronicities by maintaining a more mindful, positive state that allows you to ride the wave. There are some waves we cannot avoid, and it's better to ride with them than to try to swim against them. And we've had a lot of undertow in recent months. You cannot avoid the undertow. What you can do is begin to relax more into the wave and to ride with it. And as the Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, everything can be taken from a man or a person, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I love that. That's such an inspiring way to be thinking about the power that you have, no matter what is happening around you. And that is the gift. And so remember, you are the person that you have been waiting for. And I hope that this webinar was helpful for you. And some slides should be available for you to download as well. And please engage our wellness coaches, Tim and Doreen, any member of the wellness team, Mackenzie, Lisa, Maureen, Beth. We are all here to serve you, to serve each other. It's our mission. It's work that we're passionate about. And so I'm very grateful for your tuning into this. And, may the fall, winter, may the season to come be a season that brings you the peace and the joy that you desire. And never feel like you're out on a limb alone. There are always people that will love you, that care about you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we come to realize that this perception of being different than everyone else is an illusion. And the more that we can embrace the love of ourselves, the love and compassion for who we are, and to extend that to others, the more we will begin to change the reality that we are navigating in a way that feels more whole, more connected, more positive, and more uplifting. So I thank you for tuning in. Be well, and peace.